Welcome. In this video, I'll go over some of the important navigation things in ANSYS's Discovery Live that should help you be more productive in this workspace. When you first launch the program, it looks like this, and we'll begin with just a blank document. Before we go any further, your hands should always be in the right position when you're working with software like this. Your dominant hand should be on the mouse and your non-dominant hand on the keyboard, so that you can touch Control and Shift because you'll use those almost non-stop. The three things that you always need to do to kind of navigate and work in a place like this is to pan, orbit, and zoom. So to pan, hold down Shift on the keyboard, click the center mouse wheel, and move the entire mouse while holding those two down. So that'll allow us to drag left, right, up, down without actually orbiting. To orbit, you just have to actually hold down the center mouse wheel and then move the mouse while holding it down. That's going to allow you to pan or orbit around a point. Wherever you first click, that's going to be the point that you actually orbit around. And if you had three-dimensional objects here and you clicked far away, it'll actually put the orbit point in the kind of average center of those bodies. The third and final thing is to zoom. There you hold down Control on the keyboard, click the center mouse wheel and hold it, and pull towards you to zoom in, push away to zoom out. If you ever get totally lost or zoomed in too far, you can always press Z on the keyboard with nothing selected, and it will go back to showing you all your objects. Or if you had one face or object selected and you pressed Z, it would fit that to the entire world, to the entire screen. To show the next parts, let's actually sketch something on this 3D sketch plane. I'm going to make a simple rectangle. We are sketching right now, and I know because we can see the grid and we've got these hexagon buttons that we'll go through in a second. As soon as I make this thing three-dimensional by using like the pull tool, we're no longer seeing that sketch plane, and now we're in the 3D mode. So you have those two main workspaces that you can be in, either 3D or the sketch mode, and just see if there's a grid or not. If there's no grid, you know you're in 3D. I've been using only buttons from the shortcuts up here. There are a whole lot of other things hidden up in the menu, but for 90% of what you need to do, you can just stay with what's on the screen. Right now, we have an active tool, which is the pull tool I just previously used to make this three-dimensional. To get out of that, it's always going to be the top button that shows you what you're currently using. You can exit out here or hit escape on the keyboard to go back to just a selecting tool. To get back to sketching here, if I wanted to put a square on this face and add to this design, I could go in the sketch options, and it will ask me kind of a starting point for what shape I want to use. Let's just pick the rectangle. When you first click a sketching tool, the first click that you make is not actually going to be drawing that rectangle. It's going to be selecting what plane you want to sketch on. A lot of people forget that this is an important first step. I'm just going to draw on the top right now, so that's my first click. Now with the plane defined, the tool is actually the rectangle tool. I'm just going to make a miscellaneous rectangle somewhere in the middle and then hit escape to get out of that draw tool. Now that we're back in the sketch mode, I'm going to point out a few things that were here when we first opened the file, but we didn't talk about them. And it's these hexagon buttons down at the bottom. They will always be on the right hand side, usually lower, but if you zoom in or move this around, they may move around a bit. And if you're really zoomed in close, they'll be all the way down on the right hand side there. What they do from left to right is return us to the 3D view. If we want to get out of sketching, we can select a new sketch plane. If I want to continue using this particular sketch tool, but just in a different plane, we can move the entire sketch plane up, down, left, right, or rotate. And if you want a top-down view, so you're just looking straight onto that plane you selected, that's what the rightmost one does. Let's take a look at actually moving the sketch plane a little bit. So selecting this option, we get the move tool here, and it's always going to look like this when you're trying to move something. You can pick one particular axis and have it constrained just to that axis, and if you grab the bars in between, you can rotate. So I'm going to move this down to point out something that happens a lot. A lot of students think that their object or their 3D components here have been deleted by moving the plane. They've simply been hidden so that we can actually see the plane and not have them get in our way. If we orbit below here, we'll see that top becomes bottom, and now the top of the plane, or what we're viewing, is this side, so it's hiding that geometry, but still showing us the back. We can sketch back and forth between those. See, everything is still there. Let's go and take this all the way to the back side. So I'm going to use something up here. When you have the active tool, you'll get additional kind of contextual options or even drop down additional options here, the most common ones being up here. Let's select this one, which is the up to option, and that'll allow us to move the sketch plane up to a face. I'm going to select the one that is the lowest. So we're all the way on the bottom of that cube that we had before. The shape I wanted to draw now is a rectangle. We'll put it right on the face here somewhere. Right there. Let's exit the sketch mode by using our hexagon button. And let's try to pull that rectangle that we just put on the bottom there. You might run into the issue that you can't select it. It's kind of on the back side. And you may think that we have to rotate this all the way over to get to it. There's an important trick to know here, which is to use the scroll wheel on your mouse. If I hover over this face and I know the rectangle should be somewhere under there, I'm just going to scroll up, and it will allow me to select geometry that's a little bit deeper. If I move off the face, it resets again, so I just have to scroll in. I can always scroll backwards as well, and that's important if you have a lot of like stacked things on top of each other. You can go through and roll it back and forth to see which one you actually want to select. So selecting that inside shape there, I'm going to pull this upwards to show that when you take one thing from one side all the way to the other, it actually makes empty space there. And that may be what you want to do, but other times it might actually be the opposite of what you want to do. I'll illustrate that by putting a new rectangle on. Let's put it on a different face. We'll go to this side. I'll snap to it with this grid view here. Put it somewhere in the middle right here, and let's say I want to use this but actually have it be added to the object going out the other side. I could select this, and before I start to push it in, which will just make it an empty hole, I'm going to use this little menu that pops up. You get a close contextual menu that has some really important things. You should explore what each of them does by simply holding your mouse over it. The one that I want to use right now is to add instead of subtract. So clicking that before I pull on the arrow adds this to the body instead of removes it. The points that I've made here should help you to at least get started navigating with the most common things in ANSYS Discovery Live.